Well, Cora, welcome to Unusual Attitudes. So my first question here on a beautiful day in Philly, finally, have some nice weather here in the Philadelphia area after 6 or 7 days of rain and some crazy storms. But here in the office of headquarters of Phenom, I get to spend my time with you. So thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
My first question for everyone is always the same thing, which is just, who are you? So who is Cora Walker?
Well, Cliff, thank you very much. I'm happy to be here. Love coming out to Ambler. So who is Cora? I grew up in Boise, Idaho. When you move east and you tell people you're from Idaho, the first thing they say is, I think you might be the first person I've ever met from Idaho. So hopefully you have met other people from Idaho, but that generally is like an immediate claim to fame. And so it just was interesting. I got to college and was like, oh my, wow. The whole world opened up at Washington State University. I made amazing friends there. I went to school for hospitality, and I chose that because that's what my cousins who were gainfully employed and really made an impression on my life, that's what they were doing. It seemed very glamorous, work in hotels and restaurants, travel the world. I think I remember at one point I said, I'm going to have a house in France and a house on the East Coast, and I'll never come back to Idaho, right? So college was an amazing experience for me. I had a very specific edict, graduate in 4 years and be gainfully employed. So I made that happen. I loved the hospitality program at Washington State University. You had to have 1,000 hours of work experience to graduate. So you could not mess around. I worked during school. I did internships every summer. My last summer, my girlfriend and I drove from Sacramento, California to Chicago. So when I got to my senior year, there was an opportunity to work in career services specifically for the hospitality school. And I became the student careers person. So I met every employer that came to campus. At the time, I did not realize it, but when I look back now, that job really set the tone for how my career would work. I learned very quickly that thank you letters and follow-up notes, remembering someone's name, remembering something specific about them, it got you everywhere. And because I met every single employer that came to campus, I had tons of job offers. And in 1997, I felt pretty good, right? I was like, oh my God, this is great. I'll just go do whatever. I graduated and took a job with Aramark, not on purpose. I interviewed, had lots of offers, like I said, but I really wanted to live on the East Coast. So I took a job with Aramark and moved to Philadelphia, primarily because a recruiter was very, very honest with me. I had known her for 3 years. I interviewed for a catering sales job with Aramark. It was like, of the jobs that I've applied for, this is probably my third or fourth that I'm maybe kind of interested in. And she looked at me and said, I would no sooner put you in sales than I would just not hire you. And I was like, oh my gosh, right? And at that point, I'm all of 22. I'm thinking to myself, lady, do you know who I am? I was a little bit cocky like that. And she said, no, honestly, but we do have this great HR program. I'm like, HR? Like, who wants to go into HR? And I said, Wanda, help me. Why? Why would I do that? She said, why? Because you'd be the only person from the West Coast in the program. Of all the schools we go to, Aramark has 250,000 employees. Of all the schools we go to, we'll select up to 10 people for this program. And you'll report directly to an HR vice president, who, by the way, is based in Philadelphia. I'm like, where do I sign? Funny enough, my parents, who were very focused on get a job, move out, were like, no, you're not moving to Philly. I was like, guys, we already made this contract, right? I'm going. So I moved. I worked for an amazing VP in sports and entertainment. My friends were like, you're not even able to identify whether it's a basketball or baseball or a football organization, and you're going to work in S&E. And I was like, well, I'll be in HR. So it was a rotational program. I lived in Philadelphia 10 months. I traveled everywhere. They sent me Alaska, California. I spent a ton of time in Houston, Texas. And it really started to verify for me, this is what I love to do. All the little things about working in that career services job, that little tiny career services job, were so meaningful as I was traveling around, and kind of kept reinforcing this idea that making a connection with people is something I like to do. And there's value in it in terms of you start to build this little network where when I had a question or I wasn't sure about something, there were 3 or 4 people that you could reach out to. You had help and support. And it wasn't just about how smart you were or how easily you could navigate something on your own. And so that really reinforced for me. I stayed with Aramark for 15 years, on and off. I started a family much, much sooner than my husband and I planned to, quite by accident, as these things happen. And so I was a mom at 24, and my son, Matthew, is an amazing joy in our lives. He marches to the beat of his own drum, and he's taught us a tremendous amount. We have 2 other children, Thomas and Allison. We lived in New York for about 12 years. Aramark gave me the flexibility before flexible working was even a thing, to work part-time as long as I carried a full-time workload. So we moved here to Philadelphia and brought 3 kids with us. I think when we moved, we had something like $75 in our checking account. And I went back to Aramark for a period of time and we rebuilt. And so stayed with Aramark for a long time, got a call from a recruiter, moved to a company called VWR, which was later acquired and is now called Avantor. And I got a call from another recruiter about the job I'm in today. But if you can imagine at the time, I don't even know however old I was, but I had 11,000 US-based employees. My team was like 25. I had people all over the place. I was reporting directly to a president in a global organization. Get a call from a recruiter for a locally based 280 employees, $380 million of revenue. You'll be the head of HR. I'm like, that doesn't sound like a great gig. I mean, I'm not sure I want to do that. So I said no. And I put my head down, stuck it out at VWR for another period of time. And I finally was like, you know what? This is probably not the right place for me. So I called the recruiter probably 4 or 5 months later. And she said, oh, I'm so glad you called. The CEO is driving us crazy. You have to at least talk to him. At least talk to him. You tell him no, right? We don't want to tell him no. I was like, all right, fine. And so I think it ended up being great because he was so thrown off by my requirements for interviewing. And I was so shocked that I would even be remotely interested in something so very small that it was sort of like, all right, we might be able to make this work. And thus began the career at OmniCable, which has been literally the highlight of my work experience. I love my job. I love the people there. The company is amazing.
Well, let's talk a little bit about, I'm going to go back because a couple things that you said are really interesting to me because I think philosophically almost the same. And I'm wondering if this aligns with you. Let's talk about hospitality.
Sure.
So my dad was a chef. I grew up in the restaurant business. I owned a restaurant for a while.
Love it.
I have a standing rule when I hire someone that if they had hospitality in their background, I have a preference for that. I also have a preference if you were in a creative field. So if you were a musician and you used to wait tables or an actor that waited tables, like you're my kind of person.
Yep.
Talk to me. So you spent a lot of time in hospitality. Obviously, you interned, you went to school, like all those things. What's important to know about people that work in service careers? What did they bring to the table that might be different than someone who never, it's not a good or bad thing.
Right.
But what for you is the difference?
Sure. So we're the same. Our head of talent actually knows that this is my preference. So it's the first thing when he sends me someone, he's like, you'll be happy to know this person has a hospitality background. And that could be anything. I mean, if you worked at McDonald's, I'm super excited. So what's different? Well, you've owned a restaurant and you've worked in hospitality. So I'm not going to tell you anything that you don't know. But what's different for me is hospitality is real life on steroids in a small microcosm that is a restaurant or that is a fast food chain or that is a spa, a boutique, whatever. Anything that can possibly go wrong in a day-to-day will happen in hospitality. And the people who show up there and think about how this might impact the customer or the coworker standing next to them and thrive in that environment, they can do anything. Literally anything.
So let's flip that a little bit, because what you're seeing now, are whole generation of people that are coming into the workforce and looking at those jobs and saying, that's not for me. I want to go to the office. I need to make the six figures. I went to college. I didn't go to college. I came out, I was a touring musician. I came out of high school. I went on tour,
Awesome.
And then as I was on tour, I was working in restaurants and like making money, doing what you can to put things together. But I have a 7 and 10-year-old now, both boys, and they are learning the restaurant business. Now they're really young, but my one he wants to be a chef. My 10-year-old wants to be a chef. He loves being in the restaurant. He loves cooking. He can make pasta fresh like nobody's business, which is crazy.
Love it.
But learning things like if I said to someone in the hospitality, especially in the restaurant business, if I said K-Go, they would know that as clean as you go. And there's value in understanding what that means, or mise en place, right? Like everything in its place. The idea, the principles of working in hospitality, again, any service job, when you are the center of delivering the product or service to the customer, being a team member, there's so much value in that. How do we convince this current generation that those jobs are, by the way, AI can't replace them.
Right.
They've tried. A lot of fast food restaurants and grocery stores have put in the self-service kiosks. They're taking them out now or scaling them back because they realize that customer experience is being lost and the disconnect to the brand is being lost. And so they're bringing back the in-person jobs and sort of refocusing that maybe a little bit differently, but certainly, how do we convince this generation that those jobs have value?
Yeah, that's a tough question. So I talked to you about my oldest son a little bit. He went to Drexel and graduated, with a bachelor's degree. And he would say things like, he worked in retail for a long time. Oh, I don't know. I could never make a career of this. It's just retail. He runs an ice cream shop in DuPont Circle right now. And he's like, it's just an ice cream shop. And I'm like, oh, please do not say just, right? One, I think to your point, they're important jobs. They're jobs that connect human beings, and they're important jobs. How do we convince people? I don't know. I think the industry itself, there's a guy I worked with at Aramark who he owns his own business. It's an enterprise. He's growing it amazingly out in Southern California. And he's one of these people that is very much I believe in the mission of service, right? And of providing an experience and connecting people around the table or around their event and all of that. And I think there's a tremendous amount of value in that, especially today when, to your point, if I go to the grocery store, I probably do have to check myself out and bag my own things. I actually make a point. There's a Kimberton Whole Foods that I have to get in the car and drive to. I love it there because they talk to you. When you check out, there's someone standing there bagging and they're having a whole conversation with you as you're just checking your groceries out. I can walk to the Giant that's right next to where I live, but I choose to get in the car and go to Kimberton. Now, some people look at me and go, that's just weird, Cora, right? I don't know. If I had the answer to that, Cliff, I think you could do a lot more right now today that would impact people so positively, because I agree with you. They're not jobs that are going to be replaced by AI. And beyond, I feel like people feel like it's just service, right? It's not really a career. And the reality is it's an amazing career if you're well suited, right? If that's something that you're interested in doing.
But it doesn't have to be your career. Like
have to be.
For me, my first job when I was 15 years old, as soon as I could legally work, I was doing side jobs and things like that and hustling a little bit. But as soon as I could legally work, I got my working papers, as they say. I don't even know if that's still a thing.
It is. It's still a thing.
So working papers, the little blue card that said I could work, and went to work at Taco Bell. And I spent 5 years there. And I wound up, making restaurant manager, and eventually left the industry. I actually worked at Boston Market for a little while as a restaurant manager, and then came into this career that I'm in now, more design and technology, but so it doesn't have to be, your final decision. That's the great thing about a career and mobility. And we're going to talk about that a little bit. But it's the skills that you take. There's two things for me that I took away from my time in service. It was really like how to humble yourself.
Yes.
For the benefit of others, right?
Else.
Like your customer, your teammates, whatever it is, like having that sense of humility that no job is too small. I saw an advertisement for a CEO for he's a manufacturer. Doesn't matter what they manufacture, but he literally said in his LinkedIn advertisement, you're going to work here and do X, Y, and Z, and also you will put your name on the clean the bathroom sign up sheet. Like, because we are all hands on deck for everything. Even the CEO still cleans the bathroom.
Yep.
And I loved that because no job is too small. And you learn that in the service industry. You do what you need to do. It's like being in music, like the performance, the show must go on. No matter what happens, you still perform. And the ability to do that is really important. And I think service industry does it. I think the other thing that it does, and this is the most important thing, is it teaches you to observe people.
Yes.
There's no better place to observe people than in a service role.
Yep.
If you just sit back. My wife is a stylist. She's, she has her own salon. She went to school. She's a fine oil painter.
Oh.
So she's very, very creative.
Wow.
She's a musician. So we have a music studio. She produces. She's a very creative person. But as a profession, to make money, because it's very hard to make money as an artist.
Yes.
She is a stylist. And she has conversations all the time, with me about her clients where she's almost like a therapist.
Yes.
And anyone who has a lifelong or the stylist that they really like knows that, and she becomes an observer of human character and of human personality. And it gives her insight into things that people that just work in an office could never understand.
Agreed.
And so to that's how I sell it, because there are skills to be learned. It's not permanent, but you can't learn them anywhere else is my point.
Right. So I think, if you focus on the skills piece and you focus on it doesn't have to be a career piece. I think the piece for me is we do a disservice when we put the word just in front, or when we think about these as low skill, low pay. These are high school jobs, right? I hear this all the time. And I think when you focus on the skills and you look at the value of the learning opportunity, the connection, the humbling, right? The humbling in particular. All three of my kids, literally, all three of them, I said, the first thing you will do is get a job in service. You pick, I don't care what it is, but you have to do it as part of your growing up, right? As part of whatever your high school, or if you wait till college, that's fine too, but you got to pass through that at least. If you land there and you want to make it a career, awesome. It is an amazing career. There's lots and lots of opportunity. But at the very least, build a foundational skill set that is applicable to literally everything you will do in life, not just in your career, but in life. The ability to negotiate. Think about scheduling, not phenom scheduling, because it's fabulous, but think about scheduling we'll use Matthew's ice cream shop, right? They use a Google shared spreadsheet. They're allowed to go in there and say, what days do I want to work? What days do I need off, right? And then him, goes back in over the top of that and arranges what that schedule is. There's all types of negotiation skills that you're learning throughout that, in addition to just the diligence of this has to be done at a certain time. You want it posted. You're trying to give people notice about, I couldn't accommodate this. Can we switch that, right? So just in a basic thing around scheduling, right? You learn all types of things. And to your point, if you're making observations, if you're watching and taking the time just with your team, forget about the customers for a minute, but just with your team, the value of knowing and understanding people in such a way that you can link them together to be productive during the time that ice cream shop is open to maximize your sales. There is a lot to that. Yeah. Now you lay the customers on top of it. You don't know what to expect, right? Maybe a busload of 32 kids from Texas is going to show up, and you're going to have 3 people in the ice cream shop, and now we need to serve 32 kids ice cream. And by the way, they got to get back on the bus in 20 minutes. It's all those little things that you just don't know what's going to walk through the door. Now, I don't want to take away from any other office job, but I can promise you're not going to be sitting in an office with 32 kids getting dropped off in a bus that need to be served in 20 minutes. It's just not going to happen.
It's not going to happen.
Right.
Well, the other thing that's really interesting, there's sort of a couple of famous leaders who use the restaurant as a setting to interview people. And one of the most famous stories, and the audience can look it up, is a CEO would take out someone that he's interviewing to a restaurant. Now the restaurant knew that this CEO was always there and was doing interviews. So he sort of pre-planned this, in a way.
Sure.
It's a little bit of a test. And so he would say to the server, like, whatever this person orders, make it wrong. Bring out the wrong thing, right?
Right.
Be late on bringing stuff over.
Sure.
Right? All this just really set the person up because the CEO wanted to observe how this person treated the staff, how they handled that situation and at very high pressure. They're in an interview with the CEO of the company. And the people that passed were people that when they got the wrong order, they just ate it.
Right.
They didn't make a big deal out of it, right? Or if they got the wrong drink, for example, and they wanted the right drink because maybe they didn't want or couldn't drink that,
Sure.
they treated the staff really, really nicely.
Well,
They just were really thoughtful in their approach. And it just says sort of in the reverse, as a customer, when you look at these settings, what it can teach you. And it's just a really interesting way to look at it. The other piece that I draw from your experience is networking.
Yeah.
So you talked about this a lot. So hospitality gives you one of the greatest opportunities to network ever.
Yes.
Because it puts you in these strange environments with unknown people that you never know what's going to happen.
Right.
But you sort of built maybe in an unplanned way
Very unplanned.
your entire career around networking, from getting out of Boise, going to college. You talked about the people that you meet, putting yourself in situations and taking internships and doing these things at Hilton and other places where you're networking. Going downstairs to the English as a second language class to network with people and learn.
Yep.
Right. So everything you do, it really becomes about building the network and building. And you talked about that specifically. The community that you put around you becomes the most important thing to your career, among other things. But we'll put it at the top of that list. And when you think of today, this is mind-numbing to me. When we think about social media and being online and work from home and all those things, all the lost opportunity network. We're sitting in the Phenom office where our headquarters is. I come in here a couple days a week only to network.
Right.
Not to, because I told you before we started, I can't work here because it's a small office and we're building a new one, but it's hard to find a place to be heads down. But I come here because I can run into my CEO, I can run into my head of sales, I can run into this person, that person, have that conversation. So return to office becomes really important to me because of networking.
Yes.
Talk about networking in your career. Like, how big of a focus should that be?
In my mind, it is the focus, right? So if you say table stakes are you're going to get up every day and get in there and do your best work, right? I feel like that's table stakes for having a job. Sometimes that's really hard to do. And I certainly acknowledge and I can be empathetic about that. But the reality is you do have to get up every day and go in and do your job. Outside of that, in my mind, networking is the single most important thing that we do to enable our career to look the way we want it to look. If you were born with every single thing you needed to make it through this life, that'd be great, but be pretty lonely, right? The reality is we're not born with everything we need to make it through this life. And you're enriched every single time you meet someone new. I think before it was popular, which I feel like right now we say this to young people. I say it to young people all the time. If you're scared, you're doing it right. Yeah. Right? So if you're nervous or scared about walking into that room where you don't know anyone, well, good. Then that means you're like normal. Right?
It is. So if you think about that, that's really good advice, because how nervous and scared are you in your job right now as CHRO of a pretty substantial company, managing 16 people that have influence over a big operation? Like, for me, head of strategy at not as big of a company, but a growing company.
Yeah.
And I've worked for some very, very large companies. I feel like I'm an imposter every day.
Every day.
Right. So that never goes away. And it keeps you, like, if you look at it as a positive.
Yes.
Meaning I have this imposter syndrome. I fear people are going to find me out, that I don't deserve to be here. For a lot of people, especially people that become successful, I don't mean money successful, I mean successful that they feel that they've satisfied career goals and things like that.
Yes.
That they use that as an anchor to go, okay, I'm going to prove it today. And every day you're reproving to yourself why you have the role that you have. And you learn. And so that's normal to feel fear.
It is. That's part of being human, right? And I think that's the piece for me that overwhelmingly we've done a disservice to generations of people that perfection is what it's all about. Perfection limits curiosity, right? Perfection limits growth. Perfection limits risk in a lot of ways, because I can be perfect 90% of the time if I do the same thing every single day, day in and day out, day in and day out, day in and day out. If it is Cora's way all the time, then I can pretty well dial that in, right? But that's not living. That's not real. And so I think this idea of I'm scared and even being a little bit vulnerable to share, right? I'm really uncomfortable in this situation, but you know what? I'm going to go do it anyway. The curiosity piece is a big link for me, right? And curiosity is one of our core values, which I think is one of the best core values of any company I've ever worked for, because it reminds us that we don't know everything. We don't have all the answers, and we were never meant to have all the answers. Mm-hmm. So I'm always skeptical of people who tell me they have it all figured out, because I'm like, wow, what does that feel like? I'm not sure I have any idea. But I like not knowing, because not knowing, it serves as the reason to ask. It serves as a reason to explore. It serves as a reason to just inch a little bit closer to the thing you might be really terrified about. I guess I show up now, and it's easy because once you get old, you sort of go, I don't really care what people think about me, right? But I say this to my daughter all the time. She's naturally curious. She wants to know everything about everything constantly. But like lots of young women, she has a level of stress around, how is this going to make me look to other people, right? What might someone think about me? Now, what I love about her is she blows that off pretty quickly. It happens in a few seconds, and she sort of goes, oh, forget it. It doesn't matter, right? I'm going to go do what I want to do. But I love watching her learn about the world, because she's willing to ask. She's willing to put herself out there. People say to me all the time, you know what I noticed about your daughter, Cora? She walks in somewhere and she immediately says, hi, how are you? You're at Panera Bread, right? The cashier's like, what? I'm sorry, who are you? It's her nature. She wants to connect. She wants to see what's going on with this other person. Whether she's ordering her lunch or getting a coffee or engaging with a professor, in her mind, those are all opportunities to know something about this person standing in front of you.
It's funny because my wife, who's very introverted, she's an artist, fine oil painters, and anyone that's in the fine arts can be really introverted. That's a very common personality trait. But we'll be out, and I'll ask the server, they'll introduce them, and I'll remember their name. Mm-hmm. I'm not great with names. I just repeat it multiple times. I repeat it at least 3 or 4 times in the first minute or two that I meet the person. Hey, Cora, nice to meet you. Hey, Cora, how long have you been working here? Cora, what do you really like to eat and engage in that conversation. And there's a rule that I live by, and it comes from being in recovery. I've been in recovery for a long time, and I talk to and I coach a lot of people in recovery from alcohol and drugs. And there's a saying called play the tape to the end, right? And playing the tape to the end means think about what you're doing and how this is going to play out. Mm-hmm. And I've always used that as a strength to understand and connect with people, to say, but even at the end of this dinner date with my wife, we're going to make best friends with the server. She's going to have a wonderful time. We're going to have a great evening, and she's going to be part of that. She's not ancillary to it.
Right.
She's part of our experience. And so even at I go to my favorite Wawa, I know everyone's name there. Yep. We talk about it, but it comes down to one simple thing. Don't be afraid to embarrass yourself. And that's sort of the play the tape to the end. Don't be afraid to embarrass yourself. Embarrassing yourself is a strength. Being able to raise your hand in a room full of people, especially in an office setting where there's lots of power dynamics going on, and you raise your hand and say, I don't understand that, but I think it's this. Right. And being humble about it. That's if you combine embarrassment with a little humility, that you don't, embarrassing yourself doesn't mean stand up and say, I have all the answers.
Right.
Admit, I don't have all the answers, but here's how I see it. Is this an idea worth debating?
Yeah.
Right. And you put it out there as a question. Right. It changes the entire dynamic of things. And speaking of changing the dynamic, I do want to talk about the domain that you are a representative of. Right. And I am sort of tangentially from the technology side, but you're in it deep. CHRO, OmniCable, sort of, as we say, just top of the food chain. And we look at what's happening with artificial intelligence in our domain.
Yes.
What needs to change in HR right now? That's a really big question. I'll just leave it sort of open-ended.
Sure.
Where is this all heading?
Yeah. I think, if I'm being a little bit flippant, let's just say everything needs to change in HR, right? So part of the beauty of being at a company like OmniCable, that I got there very early on, right? Really strong legacy organization, really good reputation in the marketplace. And I've been there through the growth. And when I think about the counterparts that sit next to me in any kind of CHRO type of forum, people who are working in really big, complex organizations, right now their job is about 50,000 times harder than mine, for the sole reason they have a lot of undoing to do, right? AI is such a disruptor around how work gets done right now. There's so much legacy stuff that we've built over all this kind of industrial age, right? And you talked about power a little bit. These organizational hierarchies, the amount of power in the C-suite, right? All of those things are dynamics that right now I feel really fortunate I don't have to deal a lot with. What I find is interesting when you boil it down to what is really going on, whether it's at OmniCable or some really huge multinational, conglomerate, the same things are happening, right? It's less undoing for me, but that's a little bit why I say I think everything has to change in HR. Now, there's a reality to that. There's always going to be a job for someone looking out for the best interest of the organization. In my mind, I like that to include the best interest of every single human working at that organization, not just the entity, right? Because the entity is just an entity. It's made up of lots of human beings. But there is a level of risk is part of the job for an HR leader. Ideally, we look at how do you create relationships and partnerships with your executive team such that you're a strategic business partner, not just the person who cares about compliance and risk. Because I can do both.
Yeah, let me talk.
Sure.
I pause you there because you said the same phrase that's used in HR a lot, but I'm not sure that a lot of HR leaders really understand what it means. So that strategic, right, advisor, yes. Strategic, like you're advising the business. Those are the phrases that are used. Mm-hmm. Is that really and it might be happening at OmniCable. I'm not commenting on that, but in the domain, do you feel that that many of the leaders and people that are delivering HR services really understand the business outside of I'm helping you hire people or helping you manage people, right. But do they really understand how that business runs?
So at risk of offending other HR professionals, I would say no. Yeah. And there's a reason, right? There's a reason for that. We like HR the way we like HR. And we've made an entire industry out of being an HR professional, right? You've got all these professional organizations, certifications. The list goes on and on, right? There are degrees now in HR. Yep. One of my favorite combinations of a degree for a young person is psychology and mix it with anything else. Psychology and fine arts, psychology and computer science, psychology and criminology, right? It doesn't matter to me. Psychology as part of your undergraduate education, in my mind, is the door opener to everything because we're people, right? But we've almost institutionalized the practice of human resources as a way to, in some ways, make money and position that if you have an HR function, you're doing it right. Doesn't really matter what that HR function does, just you're required to have one, right? And if you look at it over time, you've evolved from an administrative, like you're getting people coffee and organizing how the work gets done and those types of things from way back, holding the personnel file and making sure all the boxes are checked. And right. So we've absolutely evolved from there. Where my career took a very different turn, when I started at Aramark, the first 6 weeks, we learned nothing about HR. The first 6 weeks were spent understanding how Aramark makes money. Now, I'm not saying they're this amazing altruistic company. They're there to make money and they make a lot of it. The reality for them was when you look at what Aramark provides, primarily it's services. There's not a lot of goods, right? There's not a lot of tangible product there. And the only way to provide services is to employ people. And so from an HR perspective, their mentality was, well, one of the biggest expenses we have here at Aramark is a population of employees, and we need them all kind of doing the things the way we want them done. And so if our HR organization doesn't understand how we make money, how are they ever going to be successful implementing anything, or even coming up with an idea, or contributing to the strategy, or any of it? You can't do the basics, much less be strategic. And so what I found was I'm super passionate about how the business works. I actually like that part. I'm a terrible math person. I'm not into the financials, right? That's not my gig. But I understand a profit and loss statement. I get what strategic planning means to a business, right? But not because I do have an MBA, but I didn't learn it through my MBA. I learned it from a very grassroots, ground up, piece by piece perspective, that I was fortunate to be working for a company that said, yes, compliance and benefits and compensation, those are all really important, as long as you understand what it is we do here and how Aramark makes money. And then we'll put you into the rotation and you'll do that. But early on there, it was really about being a business partner. If you didn't have a business champion, you weren't going to go very far, even in HR at
So
Aramark.
is that the bigger transition that HR needs to make right now? Is, yes, of course, compliance. Like, the business has to stay in business.
Right.
Profit is not a bad word.
Nope.
Profit is, and generating revenue is really what's driving the business and helping the business grow. So does HR, and we have to change the name of HR. It's like I just hate saying it so much, because I don't think it describes the value of the work that the people in the people organization actually bring.
Yep.
It's legacy industrial thinking that just needs to go. So I'll get off my soapbox now.
I like your soapbox.
But is the elevation of HR that needs to happen right now? I don't think there's an in between. I think HR is really at the crossroads of its time. One of two things is going to happen in this domain. Either it is going to be relegated to a back office function, or it's going to be elevated to where every business person, and here's my ultimate litmus test of will this work or not. How many times have you heard someone who runs a line of business say, I'll go talk to HR about growing my business? It never happens, but it should. Mm-hmm. So to me, that's the litmus test. If we're thinking about how HR transforms, changes its names first, then we change the strategy. But, it is sort of answering that call to say, I want every business leader to be going to whatever this new organization is called, to say, I want to grow my business. I want new skills. I want people with those skills. I want technology with those skills, because we have an opportunity that we see in the marketplace, and you're going to help me fulfill that, right? Am I correct in saying we're at the crossroads and there's just one of two ways? There's no in between. You can't operate as is anymore.
No, I don't. I think you're absolutely right that you cannot operate as is anymore. I hate to see it relegated to a back office function. I hate the headlines around, we replaced our entire HR team with AI. You didn't. And if you did, you're probably really hating life right now. It does have to change, and there is no in between. I think the opportunity, right, when I look at this idea of when the business leader says, who I need to go talk to, it's the person in HR to help grow my business. If I go back to the networking pieces, and I go back to the curiosity, and I go back to the, what am I doing here, right? Things that are different for me, at least, are if the business invites me, great. I mean, that's like icing on the cake. I love it. But I'm not waiting for an invitation, right? You asked me to be the head of HR. I feel pretty strongly that in order for our company to grow, whether you know it or not, you need my input, right? So I've been told a million times in my career, you're a little bit outside of your lane, Cora. Great. Help me understand what the lane looks like.
Also, by the way, you're probably doing something right then.
Well, that's the thing. You're doing it a little bit. Yeah. And you know what? Here's what I know. No great leader, I don't care what you're leading, no great leader has ever followed every rule and done exactly what everyone expected of them, right? You might be a leader, but you're not a great leader in that case, right? And so when I think about right? Because I agree with you. HR is the wrong word. But if I think about being a leader, so I'm part of the executive team, I'm looked at as a leader. If I'm not causing some disruption amongst my executive leadership team, what am I doing there, right? I can sit quietly, I can take notes, I can present on my HR strategic plan, but to what end? Who cares, right? And I think that's the thing for me. And it's amazing because when you lose everything with 3 little kids and you're like, oh no, what am I going to do? Your perspective shifts, right? If you don't want me here because I'm challenging you, I'm out of my lane, I'm getting into your biz, okay, probably not a great place for me to be anyway.
You just figured something out.
I'm not disrespectful. I'm not doing it to be obnoxious, right? I'm very clear about who I am and how I want to add value. I think that is one thing that as an HR leader, if I were to talk to other HR leaders, right, it is do not be afraid to tell people your value. I promise you, the CFO, the chief commercial officer, right, those folks talk about their value all the time, right? For some reason, we have this feeling like, well, I'm here to handle the people stuff. And so once everyone figures out what they're doing, they're going to just let me know, and then I'll go handle the people stuff, right? And in my mind, that is what gets us relegated to the back office, right? So yes, it absolutely has to change. We have the power to change it. Like HR professionals, we have the power to change it if we want it. And I think that's the question for me is I think we've institutionalized human resources as a practice to the point of feeling like it's the necessary thing that every business needs, and there's a way to do it. There's a practice that we follow, right? So you set up your functions and you find some technology and right? At the end of the day, do you partner with the people sitting in the room with you? Are you truly a partner to the CFO? Are you truly a partner to the CIO? Do you talk to the CIO, right? I sit and have coffee with our CIO and we crack up about the silliest things. But those moments, right? Those moments are the moments that when she comes into my office and says, oh my gosh, did you hear or have you seen or did you know, right? I am like, perfect. She's in here right now making sure that I'm aware because she values that I'm going to have an opinion about this. I'm probably going to ask her a whole bunch of questions like, oh my gosh, Shobha, I had no idea. Tell me more, right? How can I help? What do you need? In addition to, man, I recommend you pause, or I recommend you go in guns a-blazing, right? Whatever. So it's a combination of asking questions, being there to support and be helpful, and show up with your very strong point of view. What is the value that I can add to this situation? Not just waiting for how can I help.
So there's a lot of final questions I could ask you. So we've talked and covered a lot, but I'm going to ask you to predict a little bit since we're sort of ending on the note of how does HR transform?
Sure.
If it does things right in 10 years, because I think it is about a 10-year window.
Probably.
Because things do take time. It's not going to happen overnight. But those that are doing it really well are starting right now, and you're starting to see that in the marketplace.
Yes.
In your prediction in 10 years, without renaming HR, we'll just call it HR for the moment.
Fair.
What does the people organization, how is it operating? What does good look like?
Mm-hmm. So I think it's a bit more fluid from the standpoint of we obsess around structure, right? And this whole idea of skills. And I think you and I were talking a little bit about this idea that if we can help human beings find their way to employers who are there to help them build their own personal brand value, marketable skills, while they're contributing to our company brand, value, skill set, we've kind of met the best of both worlds, right? It is no longer about this like, well, you'll come here and work for us for 35 years. And for your loyalty, you'll get this pension, right? Whether you're a great performer or you're not is really irrelevant, right? While that's going away very, very quickly, and we've, I said raised generations of people who are like, I can't depend upon any company, right? Because if they need to make their quarter, my job will be gone. So I agree with you. It's at least a 10-year evolution for HR, but it's this idea that the strategic plan of any organization, right? If HR is not at the center with the ability to move fluidly between what those strategies really look like for the organization, then you're really not, you're not evolving, right? And what I mean by that is, we were just having this conversation. It's not about headcount for the budget, right? Stop talking to me about headcount for the budget, right? Tell me what it looks like. What has to be true for you to achieve this strategic objective, right? Just what has to be true. Okay, great. You've given me a list of what has to be true. Now let's look at that in terms of resources. What tech resources can help us ensure that that's your truth? What people resources can help ensure that's your truth? When we look at those people resources, then what is made up of that, right? Is it really that you've built this fancy organizational chart, you have this great hierarchy, and we've got all these rules to follow? No, it's really not. So I think it's this idea that we got to give up, and I know I say this all the time. I hate when people talk about HR like they talk about going to the principal's office. And I think principals actually don't like that either. Right. Because principals are dynamic leaders in school systems, right? They are dynamic leaders. In fact, if you've been a school principal and you want to do something else, I'm putting you up with those hospitality people, right? Because you get it. We're not the no world. That's not our job. Our job is not to say no. Our job is to say, tell me more, right? What do you think about that? Would you like input from me? And sometimes if you're being really bold, you don't ask, you just give them the input, right? But I think it's being more of a thought partner, thinking of yourself as a business leader, right? You are a business leader. And if you don't feel confident about being a business leader, it's really, really easy to build confidence if you're willing to have a little humility, maybe embarrass yourself every now and then, right? Speak up. I don't understand that. Help me understand. The other nice thing, which this has always worked for me in my career, is get on a plane, go to where the work is being done, and ask questions of the people doing the work. You learn more about the business doing that than you'll ever learn in any HR course that you ever take. If you don't know about the business, I don't know how you can contribute strategically. Yeah. I just don't.
So an hour in the field beats a month in the office.
Easily. Yeah, that's
good advice.
Yeah.
Cora, thank you for spending time.
Sure. Thank you. This was awesome. Yep. I really love it.
Thank you.